Welcome back to this new lesson in our course Masterclass in Project Management. In the previous video I drew the precedence diagram. Now we are going to look at the forward pass, and we look at some different calculations. We can calculate starting from 0, we can do the forward pass starting from 0, then we have a look at the principles of calculation from 1, and the forward pass starting from 1. And we also have a look at the differences between both methods. I already explained before that we can start doing the calculations using the events, so starting from 0, or we do the calculations using the dates, for example, the ordinal numbers when we start from 1. So let's have a look at the formulas and the principle of starting from 0. So when we start from 0, it's very important that we consider the formulas. You know that the start for the successor activity is equal to the finish of the predecessor, and the finish time of the activity is equal to its start time plus the duration. So for the forward pass, this translates in the early start of the successor is equal to the early finish of the predecessor. And we say the early finish of I plus 1, so the successor activity or the activity I'm considering, is equal to its early start plus the duration. So let's have a look at the forward pass starting from 0. So we start with A. A gives us the first calculation. On the top right, you see the legend. So we have early start, early finish on the top. And that's what we're going to do in this part of the presentation. So we have the formulas that we are using that we can calculate, or we can use to calculate the early start and the early finish times. So what do we have here? We start with A. So we start at 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. The next thing, we can already go to the early start of C and D. So we have the early start for C is 2. And the early finish is 2 plus 3 is 5. For D, we have an early start equal to 2. 2 plus 2 is 4, which is the early finish of D. We cannot go to E because E has two predecessors, so we have to first start with the calculations for B. B also starts at 0. 0 plus 4 is 4. So now for E, we take the highest early finish of the predecessor. So we have for A, this is 2. For B, this is 4. So for E, the highest early start or early finish of the predecessors is 4. The same for F. Here we only have one predecessor, which is B. So now we can calculate the next step. So we can go to the following calculations, and we find for E, 4 plus 5 is 9, and for F, 4 plus 2 is 6. So now we can go for G. G, the early start of G is equal to the early finish of C, and 5 plus 3 is 8. So we find the early finish of activity G. For H, we have to select the highest early finish of D, E, and F of its predecessors, which is 9, and 9 plus 3 gives us 12. For J, with the two predecessors G and H, we take the predecessor with the highest early finish, which is H, with 12. So the early start of J is 12, and the early finish is then 15. 12 plus 3 is 15. So this is basically the completion of the forward pass when we start from 0. The same thing we can do starting from 1. So what are the principles starting from 1? Well, here it is a little bit different, because now we have to say that the early start of the successor is equal to the early finish of the predecessor plus 1, and the early finish of the activity is equal to the early start plus the duration minus 1. And we can do that when we have the forward pass starting from 1. On the bottom you see the formulas that we are going to apply, and we start now with A. The early start of A is 1, and the early finish is 2, so 1 plus 2 minus 1 is 2. So for C and D, we can find the early start. For C, this is 3. So the early finish for C is 3 plus 3 minus 1 is 5. The early start for D is 3. And 3 plus 2 minus 1 is 4. The same like before, in order to find the early start of E, we have to find the early finish of B first. So for B, we also start at 1. 1 plus 4 minus 1 is 4. And now we can select the highest value of the predecessors, which is for B. So the early start of E is 4 plus 1 is 5. And we can calculate the early finish, which is 5 plus 5 minus 1 is 9. For F, we have the early start equal to 5. Then we have the early finish, 5 plus 2 minus 1 is 6. For G, we have the early finish of C plus 1, which is 6. 6 plus 3 minus 1 is 8. For H, we have to select again the highest early finish of the predecessors, which in this case is the predecessor E. So we take here 9 plus 1 is 10. So the early start of activity H is 10. And 10 plus 3 minus 1 is 12. For J, we take the highest value of G and H, which is 12. 12 plus 1 is 13. 13 plus 3 minus 1 is 15. So that's in fact the completion of the forward pass when we look at the two methods. It's interesting to compare the two methods because there are some differences that you must understand, and we see that both methods provide comparable results and they both give the same project end date. However, we see when we start from 0 or 1, the early start values are different. And that's very important to understand. But when we would draw this on the Gantt chart, the Gantt chart or the bar chart should be the same. So that was it for the forward pass starting from 0 and from 1. So that's it for this video. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next videos. Thank you and bye-bye.